Kate Mila Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Happy Easter. Before I gave up sugar, Easter was one of my favorite holidays. Now, I don't know, I have a different relationship with it. I thought that given the book that I covered the past few weeks, Jesus and the Lost Goddess, and the general topic of it is Gnosticism. And here we are on a holiday, a religious holiday that, okay, caveat, I'm going to be challenging a lot of closely held beliefs and things that are ingrained in our culture. And this is not meant as a judgment or criticism. It's an evaluation. It's a trying to understand. So please don't take offense. Please understand that I don't care what people choose to use as their guide and support through life as long as they treat each other well. Other than that, I don't care. Conventional Christianity, mainstream Christianity, and by that I mean all the Christians, Catholics, Mormons, Presbyterians, evangelicals, Church of Christ, I can't think who else, etc., etc., etc. That's what I consider conventional Christianity, because they all had the same starting point, which was around the 2nd, 3rd century from Imperial Rome. Before that, there was a whole different approach. And before that earliest Christianity, there was something else. It comes out of a long history. And I thought I would talk about that. And I basically sharing what I've read. And I hope I understand, because every time I talk about it, it helps to clarify a little for me. And I think it's an important topic we should all consider. So talking about Gnosticism, the early Christian Gnostics, basically, that's like the first Christians, right? They reworked the earlier ancient archetypes and pagan myths, and they restated what was considered the path to gnosis, and, which we'll talk about, using the life of this person called Jesus as the way on that path. So the story of Jesus is really a sophisticated initiation allegory. Now, it's full of symbolic language. It echoes ancient mystery schools, ancient mystery beliefs and philosophies. Most of it we today in modern world would not recognize the symbols and the coded language, because it was written to speak to the people 2,000 years ago. Now, not getting into an argument about was Jesus a real person. We'll talk about it a little as we go along. There was probably, and there's no proof other than people's feelings, but it was probably a figure, some person who became the focus of all of this. But the way in which his life was interpreted and used was not legitimate. Let's get down to it. So we'll talk a little tiny bit about the pagan Gnostics. So the story of the journey to gnosis, I'm tossing this out a lot, I should define it. It's wisdom, it's knowledge, it's Sophia, it's understanding of the reality of who we really are, human beings. And we'll talk about it. But gnosis, it's where the word knowledge comes from. It's where the word ignorant comes from. That means not having knowledge. So the story of the path to gnosis, how do you gain that wisdom? How do you gain that understanding of who we really are? The process, how to do it, what it is, it's told in mythology, pagan myth. It's allegorical. So if you sit down with Ovid, or you sit down with a book of mythology, it's stories. It's familiar stories, but it's not necessarily hugely philosophically meaningful to us in our modern time. It meant something totally different to the original pagans who had this. These are their founding stories. It meant things. Objects, relationships, numbers, all were coded. They all meant something in these stories. So there's various pagan stories of all these different gods and different individuals, heroes, and they're retelling in allegorical form of the path from identification with ego and the physical world to the gnosis of understanding who we really are. And it gets all caught up in complicated stuff. Bear with me. I'm doing my best to parse this clearly, and it's a little bit of a challenge. So in summary, Gnosticism, by definition, it's the belief in the achievement of understanding one's divine spiritual nature, that we are all sparks of the divine, and therefore, as that, we're all united as one. That human beings are trapped in physicality, in the material world. And we can return to our source, our consciousness of the divine, if we reject our identification with ego, with the material world. So what that's talking about, identifying with the physical, always wanting to be safe, always being wrapped up in things of the material consuming world, events and stuff that happens day to day in the three-dimensional world. All of it is really illusion, because it's not really who we are. And we are blinded to our reality of who we truly are by the distraction of this world around us. So what's the point of that, right? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We'll talk about that. But when you can realize, oh, I'm more than just, the physical. There are more important things for me to be putting my time and attention to than that Coach bag, or that gourmet dinner, or that new car, or all my bills. I mean, I'm not saying don't pay your bills. I'm just saying put those concerns into a larger perspective and realize that really what we're here to do is to evolve our spirit, to engage in the world, the physical world, as a big opportunity to grow our spirit, to evolve spiritually. And we do that by living a life of service to others and working every choice from a place of love and compassion, theoretically. and eventually you get to the point, is the expectation, where you achieve gnosis. You realize, oh, duh, yeah, all this stuff going on really is an illusion, because there's something much larger at play here, and we are really much greater than we in any way imagine or even recognize. And you achieve that gnosis, you really internalize it, and you start looking deeper. And you do that by meditation and prayer and introspection. So gnosis is a spiritual awakening. And it's an awakening to esoteric knowledge. And esoteric is knowledge that not everybody has, not because some people are better than other people, not because some people are special and they get this special secret knowledge, but because it requires work, to get to the point where you can really understand it and really dig deeply into it. My favorite example is Aesop's Fables. You sit with a 5-year-old and you read a story of Aesop's Fables, and they're kind of taken up like it's a fairy tale. And oh yeah, the fox and the grapes, and well, they're wrapped up in that. They may understand the basic moral of the story, but as an adult, so you would be the esoteric learner, realize, well, foxes don't talk, and the message here is much deeper, has much broader implications, and you get what's underneath the surface of this superficial story that's a beginning of learning the message, but not nearly the full message. So this spiritual growth, this awakening, is advanced through meditation, through introspection, quiet time, contemplation. So the journey to gnosis begins with the turning away from the identification with the ego. When you finally understand, oh, I'm not my body, there's more to me than that. So that the path begins then. And the exercise of love and service to other people, as your soul begins to understand, to reach an understanding of this spiritual nature, you realize, I'm experiencing the divine through love, through other people. And this is the journey to gnosis. It's completed when you finally fully process that understanding through the experience of moral behavior, and then deep introspection, really knowing your inner world. Then the soul is entirely a spark of the divine to you. You finally fully digest that. You become one with that conscious awareness. And this is gnosis. When you say, oh, I'm not my body, I am part of the divine. You're part of the divine. We're all part of the divine. We are the divine. We are all one. That's a big thing to fully get. You can say it, you can think you know it, but to fully get it, that's the true gnosis. Gnosticism, it's a term that's been applied to a long history of belief systems. All of them essentially saying that the human soul is trapped in the physical world. That the human soul is not the body. It's trapped in the physical world. That we have to end our identification with the physical, with the ego, and return to our divine source. That this path begins simply with acts of love. That service to others will lead us to a greater understanding that we are pure love. We are sparks of the divine. And we'll then travel deeper into spiritual realms by meditation, contemplation, introspection. And that will bring us to a full awareness of our divine nature, sparks of the creator or the source, whatever you want to call it. At which point, we'll be fully awakened to consciousness. Gnosticism goes back at least as far as ancient Egypt, if not farther. It's been passed down through many ages, many cultures, in the form of archetypes, myths, allegory, parables. These all contain the seeds of these ancient archetypes, and the stories are adapted to the culture and time. And so the story of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph is essentially the story of Horus, Isis, and Osiris that has been adapted to be symbolically palatable to people 2,000 years ago, and has been, well, minus 200. They all tell the same message, is what we're getting to here. That it's a journey out of the material world to a full awakening of our spiritual nature. And this awakening is an individual achievement. This is not done for you by somebody dying. This is not done for you by suffering. This is not done in any way externally. This is an inner journey that each individual must take. Pagan mythology retells this path of knowledge in various ways. The ancients were fully aware of the meaning of the symbols with which the myths are replete. We wouldn't get it. The nuance is often lost on us, just as the symbolism in the Jesus stories is missed. All those stories are hugely symbolic. They're really not meant to be taken literally. And if you had to do a dichotomy, you would say there are Gnostics and there are literalists. And the Gnostics understand the esoteric message, the symbolic, allegorical nature of these stories. Literalists say, oh, it all really happened. Gnostics existed in all belief systems. So there are Jewish Gnostics, pagan Gnostics, Hindu Gnostics, etc., etc. And at their core, almost all religions began with the basic understanding of this Gnostic journey, and then they got changed and manipulated. Gnostics of all denominations have more in common with Gnostics of other denominations than they do with their co-religionists. So if you're purely a Gnostic Christian, you would be able to sit down and share basic beliefs with a Jewish Gnostic that a Christian evangelical person would not want to hear. So Pythagoras, the guy that tortured us in geometry class, he was a philosopher as well as a mathematician. And in fact, to the Greeks, mathematics and philosophy were on an equal level. Pythagoras described a metaphysical structure that illustrates the voyage from sleep, which is ego, just attached to your incarnation, to awakening, which is identifying with your consciousness, your larger relationship to the spiritual. So our physical incarnation ego, I'll have to show you this, describes the circumference of a circle. So if you look at a circle, this is all very geometric, you look at a circle and every point on this circle is human being, the incarnation of a human being. And when you decide, okay, you know what, this is not really me. I want to go back to my source. I want to identify with what I really am. I want that spiritual evolution. You begin your trip down the radius. And it starts out with learning the basics of being a loving, compassionate person. But somewhere along this path, you move from being a beginner to being someone who wants to dig in more to the esoteric, and it's individual for everybody. There's no right or wrong. There's no better or worse. It's an individual path, but you're all going to the same place, the center, which is the source. And that's gnosis, awareness, consciousness of who we really are. So this is this little drawing that he did, the physical structure to help people understand the voyage from deep sleep to awakening. Our physical incarnation describes the circumference, and each of us begins the trip back to the center source across the radius, which is the path of spiritual work. At the center is the creator, where we finally embrace our true nature as divine sparks, spiritual beings, one with the divine. And if we're each one with the divine, we're one with each other, and we all are the divine. It's kind of like an algebra formula in math, right? So Easter, let's talk about Easter, because Easter's the big celebration of Christian salvation, right? And the purpose that the story of Jesus culminated in Easter. It's really derived from the pagan goddess of dawn and spring, whose feast was around the vernal equinox, the spring equinox. And her name was Easter. I can't say that. I think it's Oestre. It's hard to say. But her story was adapted eventually into the resurrection narrative. So think of spring as a rebirth. Think of the death of Jesus and then coming out of the tomb 3 days later as a rebirth, and you begin to see the link. Our present day image of white Jesus, with the beard and blue eyes and long hair, it wasn't gospel until about the 8th century, it was really an image that became popular in Constantinople. The question of the existence of an historical Jesus is moot. And by that I mean, we could argue it. You could debate it forever. Is there proof? Some say yes, some say no. I maintain, this is my opinion, I maintain that that's not the right question to be asking. That's not what we're supposed to be concentrating on. In the same way as we're stuck with the physical world and we're so embroiled in everything physical, what we look like, our health, the gossip of people around us, current event, I mean, all, our financial situation, all of it, much of it legitimate. I mean, you're here, you're a person, you have to deal with it. I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying walk away from it all. I'm just saying realize there's more to you. And in that same way, arguing about, was Jesus real? Where did he live? What day was he born? What difference does it make? None of that makes a difference. What was the message? That's the question. The figure of Jesus is a mythical archetype. Now this is where people might get upset with me. I'm not telling you that what you choose to believe is right or wrong. I am now telling you what Gnosticism says. The Gnostics believe that the figure of Jesus is a mythical archetype, and that his life as told was never intended to be taken literally. It was a story like one of Aesop's fables. The fox didn't walk around and talk and do what he did in Aesop's fables. Those animals there really weren't animals that were talking and interacting and carrying on the way they did in Aesop's fables. And in that same sense, all of the people in the stories of the Gospels of, Jesus were, may or may not, I mean, there really are foxes. Now, may or may not have been real. That's not the point. That misses the point. The point is not to argue that. The point is, what was their message? They weren't intended to be taken literally. That wasn't even a concern. So these stories describe the allegorical depiction of the individual journey from sleep to awakening, the knowledge of our true nature as spirit. Did Jesus really exist? It's possible. The imperial Roman authorities were desperate for a scapegoat. It's possible there was somebody espousing certain things. A lot of the details of the narrative of his life, his miracles, the parables, all of that stuff has heavy symbolic, allegorical meaning. And if you were a person who lived in that time and you heard that story, you would recognize that these were symbolic. Whatever happened, eventually it became a control system. And so the idea of us needing to be saved by a blood sacrifice because of our inherent sin, this is anathema to Gnosticism. This is not what the original Christians believed. This is what evolved from imperial Rome. So we are our own saviors, according to Gnosticism. We wake ourselves up from our physical stupor and do the work to fully experience our true nature, which is spirit. Nobody can do it for you. There are no saviors. You are your own savior. So how do the stories of Jesus represent Gnosticism? Let's talk a little bit about that. The life of Jesus is a coded retelling of an esoteric understanding of our true reality and our life purpose. From his beginning, the stories are replete with symbols that mean much more to the original listeners than they do to us today. So I'll give you the Nativity as an example, and I'll just quickly go through the symbolic, allegorical nature of the story of the Nativity. The Magi, magicians, follow a falling star. A falling star in the sky comes to a cave to acknowledge a birth. This is very symbolic to pagans of the time. The star is the spark of the divine. And everybody knew, because the star came to a cave. Originally, it was a cave, not a stable. And it's where the divine child was born to the goddess. Mary is the goddess. In pagan mythology, a goddess sits at the mouth of a cave and sorts souls for their next incarnation. Pagans would recognize this falling star, the goddess, the cave, all heavy with symbolism. The gifts they bring, this is interesting, they represent the perfection of the divine spirit, which is the gold. The death of the ego in the physical world is what myrrh represented to these people. An awakening of the soul was frankincense. And people recognize that the same way, you know, we talk about, the appropriate gift for your wedding anniversary. What year is paper? What year is wood? What year is silver? Silver anniversary, right? We may not know it exactly correctly, you know, because we don't pay that much attention. But in those days, people knew that if you got gold, it was representing the perfection of God. So at the age of 12, let's move on from there. At the age of 12, Jesus had his awakening to his divine purpose. This was traditionally an age in the Jewish religion where you became an adult in your religion, but also he came to an awareness of who he was because he's preaching to the priests in the temple. This is a real, he's assuming a lot to do that. But it's because it's symbolic. He's superseding man-made limited religious laws. It's all very symbolic. Did a little boy who was 12 named Jesus sit and preach to the priests? That's not the point. The point is, here's somebody who represents a larger story, and this is the moment when he realized, oh, I need to look inward. I am more than just this little kid. 40 days in the desert, and his subsequent baptism by John the Baptist. This represents awakening through contemplation, meditation, the hard work of working on yourself on that journey, and then purification from worldly ego, not from sin, but from identification with the world. It's like you start out fresh. And it's the focus on the death of the ego. The 12 is a really important number in the mythology and understanding of people at that time. The 12 apostles represent a lot of different things. They represent the 12 signs of the Zodiac. Jesus is the sun, S-U-N-S-O-N. And each of these apostles has certain traits that would be recognizable to people of the time as identifying with Zodiac signs. The Last Supper is organized that way. The Last Supper is organized in order of Zodiac sign for each apostle. And I don't know much about astrology, but that would be something interesting to look into. Jesus represented the age of Pisces, as in the multiplication of loaves and fishes. Loaves, bread, represented these people in their awareness. Bread represents wisdom, and the fish was the representation of the age of Pisces. He enters Jerusalem on a donkey before his passion and death, to the waving of palms, Palm Sunday. The donkey is very representative. It's his base nature. He's risen above his base nature. He's on top of this donkey. The divine spark takes charge over the lower earthly nature. The palms that are waved are a symbol of victory over death. That would mean that to those people of the time. So this is the archetypical journey towards personal apotheosis. Man becomes God. The Last Supper symbolizes the transmission of wisdom with the bread and the divine presence represented by the wine. They all partake of the divine and the wisdom and become one. It has nothing to do with flesh and blood. They knew that. We've lost the plot. The Garden of Gethsemane, or Gethsemane, depending on potato. It translates to oil press, as in olive oil. It was the Garden of Olives. And he goes through this struggle, and that struggle represents his effort to give up his ego and to embrace the oil of divine enlightenment, the oil that was used to anoint initiates into esoteric belief systems was olive oil. And Christ, okay, this is the beginning of his passion, a passion which is really the growth of his denial of ego and embracing of his spiritual side, his divinity. The word Christ, I mean, his name is not Joe Smith, Jesus Christ. It's not like that. He's not like Mr. Christ. That's not the right way to look at it. The word Christ is a title. It means the anointed one. It comes from the word chrism, which is the oil. And there were lots of anointed ones. He wasn't the only one, and they weren't blood related. It's not a family name. He's been anointed with the gift of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, people would know then, was Sophia, wisdom, gnosis. So the points of light over their head, this is the light of understanding, awakening. That was the Holy Ghost. Jesus, another name for Jesus, and it just has to do with the choice of spelling, is Joshua. And Joshua is the person who actually led the children of Israel into the promised land, because Moses died before they got there. And Joshua is Jesus. And the Exodus from Egypt is a turning away from the physical reality of enslavement to the ego, crossing the desert of effort and work, trial, the work you put into it, purification, going across the water, being led by Jesus, the anointed one, the knowledge of Sophia. The cross. So people talk about the crucifixion. This is Easter time, right? The cross actually is symbolic of a separation. It divides identification with the physical with identification with the spiritual. Crucifixion of Jesus, his death, is the death of the ego. The resurrection is the rebirth to an understanding of his spiritual eternal nature. So, born in a cave, the original story, born in a cave, where the souls are sorted for reincarnation by the goddess, put into a cave at death, back to the cave, just like at birth. And he left the cave. He came out of the cave and was reborn. It's talking about reincarnation. This is the pagan symbol of sorting souls into a new life by the goddess of wisdom. This entire story, if you notice, the story of Jesus coming into Jerusalem, the suffering that he went through, his death and his resurrection. This is not a story about threat or sin or suffering or being born bad and needing to be saved by somebody. It's not about fear. It's not about punishment. It's not about a savior. It's not about sacrifice. It's about taking individual responsibility, doing the hard work, turning away from centralizing the importance of physical stuff and looking at the larger, more important reasons for why you were born here now, and setting aside that attachment to the physical and the ego, doing the good works to attain an understanding that all is love and we are love and we are all one, and then putting in the time and the meditation and introspection to fully know that we're all parts of the divine. If one suffers, we all suffer. When all of us fully understand this, we'll achieve gnosis. And then we'll all unite, but all of us have to do it. So that's what's taking so long. But it's not up to us to do it for other people. It's up to us to work on ourselves. That's why we're here, to work on ourselves. And eventually, feels like it's getting longer than shorter, but eventually, we're all going to unite in pure consciousness, in pure love at the source. So, just as a little PS, eggs you know, in Easter lore. Eggs actually represent rebirth. Rabbits represent fertility, because this was all the goddess of spring, fertility, rebirth is the original source of this holiday. And chocolate represents the most important food group. So happy Easter. I'm hoping that this was, let me use the word enlightening. I'm hoping that this was interesting. I hope it is not taken as a challenge to people's faith or their belief. It's an invitation to look at things a little differently. I found it fascinating. Oh, let me recommend this book, and I synopsized it here. I think this weekend is the last 2 parts. It goes deep into this. And then I just got this book. I haven't read it, but it's recommended as the best beginner book on Gnosticism. So I'll put that there. I may or may not cover it depending when I start to read it. One never knows with books. Some lend themselves really well to synopsizing and discussion, and others just get too into the weeds, or they're too much personal narrative, or they're too much dialogue between people. It's extremely difficult to synopsize that, but we'll work on it. But notice this is an ancient tradition of inner knowing. Okay, have a nice Easter, everybody. I hope you find lots of eggs out there in the yard and not do what I do. One day I was out in the summertime gardening and found a plastic egg with a chocolate, one of those little miniature chocolate candy bar things that had been there for over a year. I won't tell you whether or not I ate it. Happy Easter, Slungafoil, Slancha.